Week 6 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I look to drop this week. The first guy, Marsh of the Philadelphia Phillies. So Marsh got off to a roaring start the first month of the season, but the numbers have slowed down a little bit over the last 2 weeks. On the season, 4 home runs, 14 RBIs, 18 runs scored, a 314 batting average, and a 402 on base. So those numbers very solid in the early going here for Marsh, and a stolen base. So on the season here for Marsh, 4 home runs, 14 RBIs, 18 runs scored, a stolen base, a 314 average, and a 402 on base. So he got off to the hot start in the early going. But the last couple weeks here, no homers and RBI, 4 runs scored, a 222 average, and a 300 on base. So Marsh throughout his career was never really a batting average guy. Last season, 245 average was solid for the Phillies, helping them get to the World Series. But he did strike out 158 times, and so far this year, 35 strikeouts, already in 102 at-bats. So he's not really putting the ball in play. He's not really showing pop over the last few weeks here with no home runs. And right now, he's not doing much for fantasy owners. No doubt about it, he could get going once again, but a lot of offers lately. And he's a hitter I would drop this week. May 2nd at the Dodgers, 0 for 3. May 3rd at the Dodgers, 1 for 3, a run. May 5th versus Boston, pinch hit and walked in that one, 0 for 0. May 6th versus Boston, 1 for 4. And May 7th versus Boston, 0 for 3. So, like I said, the last week or two, we've seen nothing from Marsh. He don't play much versus lefties. And right now, while his hot streak is over, he's a hitter to drop. And that's part of the game with fantasy baseball. A few weeks, guy gets hot, you keep him. And then once he fizzles out and the hot streak's over, you drop him and you just move on to the next player that could possibly carry you a few weeks of help. And it's just a cycle of how fantasy baseball works. So right there, after Marsh now has been struggling the last few weeks, he's a hitter I would drop this week, and he's come back down to earth. The next guy's Grissom of the Atlanta Braves. So Grissom last season, he was great coming up for that Atlanta Brave team in the summer. But this season, he came up, and he didn't do much for fantasy owners with RC down. But now RC are back for this Brave team. So on the season, no home runs, 7 RBIs, 5 runs scored, a 277 average, and a 314 on base. A batting average and on base, pretty solid for Grissom. But he wasn't showing power, obviously, which he's not. He's still a 21-year-old shortstop, second base combo guy for fantasy baseball. But he's not going to drive in a lot of runs as well with the back end of that Brave lineup. So the Braves sent him to the minors, and he's not really a top prospect hitter I would stash right now. If you got NA spots, May 1st at the Mets, 1 for 4. May 2nd at the Marlins, 0 for 2, a run. May 3rd at the Marlins, 1 for 5, a run. May 4th at the Marlins, 0 for 4, golden sombrero, but he did have an RBI in that ball game. And May 6th versus Baltimore, in his last appearance before getting sent to the minors, 2 for 3 with a run. So Grissom, I think we'll see him on later in the year, because if he just keeps tearing it up in AAA, and he's done everything he could do down there, the Braves will bring him back up. But right now, there's no reason for fantasy owners to hold on to him. Like I mentioned, he's not a big-time hitting prospect, and he's a hitter you can get away from this week and drop. The next hitter is Joey Gallo of the Minnesota Twins. So Gallo, a few weeks ago, he was a solid pickup off the waiver wire, but he's in one of those slumps again where he's not doing anything. And on the season, 7 home runs, 14 RBIs, 13 runs scored, another horrible batting average here, 186 average, and a 329 on base. So we know the deal with Joey Gallo throughout his career. He's going to hit in the 200s or below 200, show major power, which he does have 7 home runs this season, and he's going to strike out and walk a ton. But over the last couple weeks, it's been worse here for Gallo. 2 homers, 3 RBIs, 6 runs scored, a 139 average, and a 311 on base. So right now, he's not doing much as Joey Gallo. The on base is nice, no doubt about it, but if he's not really hitting home runs and driving in runs, and it's just 0 for 2 with a walk and a run type of day, he's not going to bring value. May 2nd at the White Sox, 0 for 4. May 3rd at the White Sox, 0 for 2. May 4th at the White Sox, 0 for 2 with a run. May 5th at the Guardians, 0 for 4. May 6th at the Guardians, 0 for 1. And May 7th at the Guardians, 0 for 2. So right now, a lot of offers and not much going on with Joey Gallo. So right now, while he's struggling, I would drop him back off to the waiver wire. And no doubt he could get going and heat up. He's just a streaky power hitter like that. But when the power's not showing in the RBIs, he's not valuable for fantasy owners. And he's a hitter I would drop this week. The next hitter I would look to drop is Brian Anderson of the Milwaukee Brewers. So Anderson, I mentioned him last week as a drop, but he's still owned in a decent amount of fantasy leagues is Anderson. I know he got off to the hot start the first 2 weeks of the season, but he really hasn't done much as well over the last few weeks here as Anderson. On the year, 5 home runs, 20 RBIs, a 252 average, and a 338 on base. But the last couple weeks for Anderson, non-existent in fantasy baseball. No home runs, 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored, a 200 average, and a 289 on base in the last month where he's only hit 200. So right now, Anderson got off to the hot start with his new team, but now we've seen nothing from him, and he's a hitter I would drop this week. Yes, he could get hot again and get going, but a lot of 1-for-4s and 0-for-3s we've seen from him. May 2nd at the Rockies, 0-for-4. May 5th at the Rockies, 3-for-4 with a run. May 5th at the Giants, 0-for-3. May 6th at the Giants, 0-for-2. May 7th at the Giants, 1-for-4. And May 8th versus the Dodgers, 1-for-4 with a run. So right now, Anderson not showing power, not even driving in runs, and he's just not hitting it all. So this week, he's an easy drop, and it's surprising to me he's still on the 55% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final hitter I look to drop this week here, Juan Bay of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So the Pirates, they got a lot of good role players this season, putting up numbers, playing good baseball, and their pitching's been good. And this is why they're in first place in the Central and one of the better teams record-wise. Here for Bay, obviously, his specialty, stealing bases, were 14 on the year, but he pretty much doesn't do anything else for owners. 2 homers, 9 RBI, 17 runs scored, 14 stolen bases, a 239 average, and a 300 on base. So right now, if you want the stolen bases, and if you're in a category league, yeah, it'll pay out a little more for you. But if you're in a points league, the stolen bases aren't really that valuable if he's not doing much. Well, right now, banged up as well is Bay with an ankle injury, and he's not going to show power or driving runs, and he's pretty much a one-trick player with the stolen bases. So the last few games here for Bay, May 2nd at Tampa, 0-for-1. May 3rd at Tampa, 2-for-3, 2 stolen bases. May 4th at Tampa, 0-for-3. May 5th versus Toronto, 0-for-3, a stolen base. May 7th versus Toronto, 0-for-2. And the last 2 games now, he's been out with injury here as base. If he's not getting on base, obviously, he's not going to steal bases, and that's been the case right now. The last week and a half, we haven't seen much base stealing from Bay because he's not hitting the ball or even drawing walks. So right now, well, he's not doing much. And like I said, pretty much stolen bases is the only category he's going to give owners. He's a hitter I would drop this week, so that's a few hitters I look to drop in week 6 of the fantasy baseball season.